Hello everyone, welcome to the second Classic Movie Monday, and today I thought I would discuss a film I think you could put it in the underrated classic category, in that I believe a lot of people still recognize this film and praise it, but at the same time nobody really talks about it or references it that much. So I thought it would be interesting to bring this film to light. And it is called The Shawshank Redemption. Now, in case you have or have not heard of this film, basically The Shawshank Redemption revolves a lot around prison life and the circumstances that convicts faced during a particular time period within the later 1940s and 50s in America. And it's rather interesting that they decided to make it sort of in a earlier time setting than maybe having it take place during our time today. So it is a rather interesting, I think, take into the prison world. And the interesting thing too is that the director, Frank Darabont, I believe is his name, actually made The Green Mile as well. So you can notice kind of these little similarities here and there, but there's actually a lot of differences too, in that it focuses in on different aspects of prison life, on way different characters as well. So it is really trying to paint, I think, a different picture of the prison world that The Green Mile didn't really touch on. So I think even though people will comment that it is rather similar and that, yeah, it takes place in a prison and it has a lot to do with people being wrongly convicted, and it's also based upon a Stephen King novella that's actually has a somewhat different yet similar title. The title being Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. I don't know how close they are, but it is emphasized that it is trying to adapt from this particular work, the movie. So I think for the most part you could say that it does have its striking similarities to The Green Mile, but at the same time it feels like it's maybe addressing them in sort of a different way. I felt The Green Mile was maybe a little bit more about sort of life, in particular the title, as if you don't know and have not seen the film, it basically sort of represents sort of life and how we're all walking our own green mile. And you'll kind of see where that saying comes from if you choose to watch The Green Mile. But this film, The Shawshank Redemption, I think focuses in more on like friendship and the concept of freedom and hope. There seems to be a lot of other thematic things going on within this particular work. Corruption as well. Whereas The Green Mile, I felt, was maybe more focused in on sort of the good and the evil within the prison environment. It seems like The Shawshank Redemption tries to focus in on the shades of gray, in that not all of the convicts there, at least most of the convicts that are there, are fairly friendly and not so overly, I guess, crazed, you could say. I mean, there are some bad ones, like you'll see in the beginning how the main character has to fight these people off, but they end up being put somewhere else in the way beginning. So it does seem that the way that this film treats sort of people who were convicted in a different light than The Green Mile did, where you have a character like I believe his name was like Wild Bill or something, who's completely crazy. You seem to have a lot more characters that seem a little bit more, I guess, relatable, because I think the film was trying to enhance the idea that not all people who maybe are convicted of crimes maybe actually did convict those crimes, because again, we do have an innocent person as our main character who ends up even eventually saying in the films, as so quasi a joke, everybody in here is innocent. You know, sort of like everybody within these walls is someone that shouldn't, I guess, be seen as a threat. So again, you kind of do see these differences sort of popping up if you decide to watch the film. And I thought it was interesting to sort of choose this film in, again, that classic category. I think a lot of people really end up enjoying this film. A lot of people have praised it. There seems to be a lot of people who put it in one of their favorites, or really like to praise this film. I think maybe a little bit more than The Green Mile, but at the same time I think it's sort of on that same level as The Green Mile, but it's discussing these different thematic messages. So basically, in case you don't know what The Shawshank Redemption is about, besides me giving you a summary sort of what the environment is, it's basically about a convicted man named Andy Dufresne, and the actor that plays him is Tim Robbins, and basically he is convicted, and you'll see this from the way beginning on, of killing his wife and her supposed lover, or, well, not really supposed, it's clear that she was having an affair and she wanted a divorce, and there was all this evidence that was really piled on in the way beginning. And when the evidence starts piling on, you can't help but feel like, yeah, I could see, him doing that. But he actually turns out to be innocent. It's kind of established sort of early on that he is not the kind of guy who would probably go out and do something like that. So basically he's falsely accused, and he's sent to prison for, I guess, 2 life terms, because since he's supposedly, according to the jury, killed 2 people, he should serve those life sentences. And during his time in prison, he comes in contact with a man named Ellis Boyd Red. Usually people call him Red throughout the movie. And he's played by Morgan Freeman. And you'll start to see these 2 characters, Andy and Red, develop a very strong friendship. And you'll kind of see how the circumstances within the prison world sort of bring them closer together, and you'll kind of see them try to have these little moments where they just kind of bond. And I really felt like that this was a film that was trying to emphasize friendship a lot, in particular between these 2 characters, because prison is a fairly or being convicted and sent to prison is a fairly lonely life, and the fact that Andy was able to develop this strong friendship with Red over time, I think shows sort of that even within life, no matter how low you get, there's always something there to kind of lift your spirits. And it's kind of touching in that way, and you see how they feel like fairly human characters, and they don't feel like that they're really bad people. They've just maybe made some mistakes in their life, and even though Andy is innocent. I'm not sure. I believe Morgan Freeman's character was guilty of his crimes, but again, it's sort of like, I think he was. It mentions that later on in the film that he was convicted fairly early on in life, so it was I think to the point where he didn't know any better, and so you kind of realize that even though there is this past that really haunts the characters, they still manage to overcome it and sort of find redemption. And I think that's really why it gets this title. It's really trying to enforce that redemption, and that everything that's supposed to be right will end up being right. And that is sort of done through hope, and at times you'll see how the characters are discouraged, and even though Andy tries to think positively, Morgan Freeman's character Red sort of tells Andy, no, you shouldn't think about hope, because there's no hope here in prison. You know, you're gonna just live your life this way. You're just gonna have to put up with that. So even though it does touch on these like realistic aspects and harsh realities of prison, it still tries to give you a sense of spirit, and at the same time a sense of hope, which I think is okay to have, because it inspires you to make something more of your life. And you'll kind of see how Andy eventually ends up doing this towards the end of the film. Even though he's been thrown into completely different circumstances and was living a fairly normal life as a banker before his wife ended up having an affair and wanting to divorce him, and then him being convicted of something that he didn't do. So you really get the sense of these two characters, the relationships they have. There's a little bit of mystery in Red, in that we don't really know much about him. We don't really know his backstory all that much. But at the same time, it's almost like we don't really need to. It's enough where the two characters can just interact and have fun, and you'll see how they interact with even more characters throughout the prison. And you'll see how at one point there's one particular character who has difficulty adjusting when he gets out of prison too, because there is this whole emphasis too that once you get used to the life that you've had, it's hard to transition to something completely different, similar to a circumstance of like somebody maybe going to war and then suddenly having to come back and live a normal life, and you'll see how sometimes that's maybe not possible for some people. In particular, one character that you'll end up running across if you choose to watch the film. But I don't want to give too much away from that, because that's spoiling the plot, so I can just keep that fairly short in the sense that they do come across these different characters, and you see how they all interact and what ends up happening to each character, and you almost find, and I almost find it fascinating how the Green Mile doesn't really paint a lot of the prison guards as jerks, but in this movie it portrays a lot of them as fairly forceful and harsh and cruel. You'll even see how the person who's sort of running the prison, Warden Samuel Norton, who's played by Bob Gunton, you'll see how he too kind of uses the prisoners for his own gain, and for corruption too. And you'll see kind of how Andy gets involved in this, and how he's rather intelligent too, because he is a banker. So you'll kind of see how, even though there's people who maybe have not been convicted of a crime, there's still this sense of there's still corruption going on, and there's still people who are out there that may be responsible for something, and they're not behind bars. And then there's somebody like Andy who didn't commit the crime that people say he did, and he's behind bars. So you really get this sense of how sort of unjust it feels to know that that there's people who can still come away scot-free, but really actually have committed something, and then there's people who are innocent who are trapped. So you kind of see this dualism going on here of being sort of in the jail, being out of the jail, and it seems to gel these things, I think, out really well. And I think the ending is fairly satisfying. I really like the emphasis of friendship in it throughout the film. I think that really enhances the drama that goes on, and gives us a sense of hope, and at the same time a sense of appreciation for friendship. And you kind of can't help but sort of smile at certain points. You know, there'll be points where you feel completely sad, or feel like the film is going to go into an unpleasant direction, but then it seems that things turn out better, and there is this sense of bringing you back to the whole idea of hope, and that, you know, that it's not silly, it's something that we all can have. So it's really what brings everything sort of all together throughout the entire film as a whole. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say about it. What I do feel makes this film kind of strong for people is the acting. Again, you do have some really good actors in this film who do feel like they are characters, and who do feel like just normal people, but with personalities that you can relate to. I thought Morgan Freeman did a really good job in the film, and he sort of narrates too a little bit, so everything seems fairly clear. There wasn't a point where I was confused or completely lost. I think for the most part I understood what was going on, and it tries to make things, I think, fairly clear within the film. And even at the kind of subtle moments as well, like you'll see how at one point Andy's character, he turns on a record, and he turns it up really loud and puts on the speaker so that everybody in the prison can hear it. And Morgan Freeman sort of explaining how it's sort of a representation of them wanting to, you know, feel for a few minutes freedom, that they're not in this prison, that they're in another state, and that they don't need to feel constantly like there's a bar around you. And it's something like that music can do, and Andy sort of does this and shares it with the people within the prison, and you kind of get that sense of how he wants to make things better throughout the prison. You'll see at one point too how he tries to help this kid that ends up being convicted and pass a test. That's sort of a high school equivalency test. And you'll kind of see how he tries to open up a library, and how he does taxes for people. You know, he tries to kind of establish this sense of normalcy within his confines. And yeah, I think for the most part it does a really good job of trying to create this world for you, and tries to make you feel that that prison life was harsh and wasn't easy, but there are people out there who managed to make it through and not let that time in their life sort of define who they are. So I guess that's really all I can say about this film. It's fairly to the point and a lot more simplistic than I thought it would be, and that's sort of refreshing. And it's a touching film, and it'll take you to that place of happiness. And even though the characters have to go through a lot, that happiness and joy that comes through in these little moments, I think really pay off for the audience. So I think that's really all I can say as a whole. Again, any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody, bye-bye, and thank you so much for watching.